You're listening to the Relevance Hour, the podcast where purpose-driven leadership and bold ideas bring more impact and relevance. Join Andre Viringa and Denis Drossart as they talk to inspiring leaders, disruptors, and change makers, redefining how we learn, lead, and interact. Get ready for stories, insights, and conversations that keep you ahead and always relevant.
Hello and welcome to the Relevance Hour podcast, a space where relevance and leadership come together to transform the way people learn, lead, and interact. I'm Denis, and today we're talking about leadership quality that often gets labeled as soft, but in reality, it's one of the hardest things to master and one of the most powerful tools for transformation: inspiration. Inspiration isn't just about passion, speeches, or catchy slogans, right? It's a strategic force that fuels engagements, resilience, and change, especially in an industry like hospitality, where people are at the heart of every output and result. So here's the question. How do you, as a leader, inspire people not just to follow you, but to believe so deeply in what you're building that they can make it their own? So my guest today knows one or two things about that, right? So he's the Chief Customer Officer at FORA, an incredibly fast-growing collections of houses in the UK and beyond. Matthew, who are you? Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me. So I'm Matthew. I'm the Chief Customer Officer for FORA. So we're a collection, as you mentioned, of beautifully designed workspaces. So we have just over 60 spaces in London and another 5 in Germany, and then another few in the kind of regions around the UK. So predominantly London-based company. We've been going for just over 20 years. We've come together with another organisation, TOG and FORA recently merged 2.5 years ago into a very large organisation, and now we've obviously grown to what I mentioned in terms of the number of sites. So my main role as kind of Chief Customer Officer is to ensure that our customers never want to leave. That's my role and my objective. I do that by making sure that I look after the operations team, our insight building teams, our day-to-day facilities teams, and our property and our asset teams to make sure that we deliver these beautiful spaces and that actually everybody who comes to work within a FORA enables them their business to be great. And our vision and missions around inspiring businesses and their people to do great things. For us, it's really important to enable them to be great, allow them to be great and concentrate on their business and their business to be good. And we take care of the day-to-day organization of their business and their property. And for us, and so we have people anywhere from sizes, offices of one person all the way up to a building of 400, 500 desks. So we cater for smaller organizations, startups, SMEs to larger enterprise organizations. And for us and our day-to-day is about trying to create extraordinary experiences for them and their staff to ensure that their staff can be the best they can at work.
Yeah, I had the chance to come a few times. So the stories around propelling businesses and people forward really came alive from talking to real life customers and also some 20 plus years employees that you have. Beautiful example on how you truly also inspiring also on truly how you live your purpose. So thank you for being here with us, Matthew. We're going to talk today about what does it really mean to truly inspire. Let's start with the fundamentals. Matthew, we hear the word inspiration everywhere, right? In conferences, on LinkedIn posts, we see it on corporate values statements. But from your perspective, what's the real difference between simply motivating people and truly, truly inspire them to change how they think, act, and interact?
I think, it comes down to, I think, kind of the difference between kind of management and leadership. And management for me is kind of setting tasks and priorities and making sure people live by deadlines. And whereas leadership and inspiring, that's the difference, right? So leadership is trying to inspire and cultivate a culture where your teams buy into your vision for the company and what you want to do. And that's kind of the hardest trick, right? And there's no kind of easy way of doing it. But I think part of the big journey for me is helping my team reframe their views, especially a lot of the junior managers in my teams and my teams previously in multiple other companies, actually helping them to understand it from other people's viewpoints, to understand it through other people's eyes, and also understand the end user. What's the goal? What's the objective? Why are we doing this? I think that has also helped because the thing is, when we are so busy managing our teams, we forget the reason why and the so what And what's it going to matter to me? And why should I believe in what you're trying to do? And for me, that's probably the biggest bit inspiring of how different it is between kind of management leadership to actually being an inspiring leader.
I love that distinction, right? How do we turn managers into leaders, right? But I guess here's the challenge, right? In your world, leading a global hospitality business where people come from incredibly diverse backgrounds, culture, and they have different communication style, different languages. When trying to inspire across those different culture, what changes and what stays really the same according to you?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think the biggest one we have a team of, obviously in Germany, we have a basis mini HQ over there. We have 5 sites currently over there. And definitely one thing we've noticed, and one thing that we happened previously before my time, is that I think there was this conception that, everything must be run from the UK and everything can just be the same across the globe. And I think we learned very early on that that's not the case. There are huge cultural differences between societies, religions and genders and everything else have to be taken aside, but also just how the society works and the norms. And maybe a handshake might be useful in the UK, but it's very different in Japan. And so I think sometimes it's also learning and also asking questions. Never be shy to also say, how does this come across? What if we do this? How can we do this better? What does this mean over here? I think there's a conception sometimes that if something works over in one country, it will work in another. We set up a mini HQ in Germany in the end because actually it didn't make sense to run the business over here centrally. And actually people who understood the culture, the teams, the nuances in running an exceptional business made sense to us to invest in having a mini HQ, which could respond much quicker and have the nuances and also the understanding of those cultural differences. You can learn, of course, over time, but there's nothing more than employing people from that nation who understands those little nuances to make a big difference, because they make a big difference culturally. Because if you don't set your business up with the right culture, you're never going to have a successful business. And culture is so important that those nuances become the difference between success or failure.
I love that. It's really that level of extreme curiosity within their background, right? Getting all the context and being extremely curious, basically about where they're coming from, right? So having that understanding. So
yeah, you shouldn't assume. We shouldn't assume
exactly
because it works here, it doesn't. It works there, and I think we were a bit naive in the original part that we just presumed, apart from the legalities and tax, of course, and things that you knew that were black, but in the grey, where things were a little bit more nuanced, and that's where we probably failed. And actually, in learning in hindsight, hire people from there, ask questions, understand what it means. I think that was the most important learning for us.
Yeah, I love that. It's all about the nuances, right? Details matters the most. So let me ask you this. According to you, is inspiration a skill that leaders can learn, or you think it's something more innate, tied to personality or charisma?
Yeah, I mean, my initial response is that no. I mean, I think everything can be learned. No one wakes up or grows up to inherently be a doctor or an astronaut or a physicist or whatever, right? Those things you learn. And I think in life, you may have nuances or conditions or skills or behavioral tactics that you are born with that allow you to be more specialist in maybe a skilled set or a profession, I think, because you may easily understand. People who are good with maths generally are able to think more logical, right? And I think there's perceptions of, so I think your skill base, which you learn over time, but also inherent from your family, help you to become the certain skills. And some people fall into jobs that match their skill base and their natural, that's how you get the top performers in the world, because I think their skills versus their profession perfectly match. And that's how you get the best of the best in the world. But I think everything can be learned. I don't think it just means that you have a different perception or a different skill set that you can't learn to be inspirational. And I think a lot, like I said before, it's about reframing. I think we all are naturally, as we get older, become very innate and quite quick at, your junior managers say, I've got an issue. You'll be, just do this. And it's very easy for us to become like that because it's easy, it's simple. And actually, it doesn't give them the time to think about it themselves and get to that answer themselves. And so actually taking the time to stop and actually learn and give them the freedom and the tools and the coaching and the questioning to help them get to the answer, I think is really important. And I think sometimes in life we are just too busy, we forget, and it's the easiest thing to do is give them the answer rather than allow them to find out the answer themselves. And so I think it definitely is a skill that can be learned over time. And I think part of that is also around being able to reframe and understand the difference between actually what inspiration is. I think inspiration can mean so many things to so many people. Is it creativity? Is it just inspiring from a personal skill level? Is it inspiring because you're a great articulate speaker? I think so. There's so many ways that you can inspire. It depends on the audience also that you're trying to inspire. I think inspiration, sometimes people always think it as motivational, loads of energy, extrovert, and that's not what inspirational. There's many inspirational leaders out there that are quiet, calm, consistent, and that is also hugely inspirational for the skill set of people that like that. So there's lots of different people, cohorts of people that like certain ways to be inspired. So I think you may not feel like you're inspirational because you're not an extrovert, but actually there's different ways to be inspired. And I think it's up to us as leaders to help talk about the different ways that you can inspire through different methodologies, through different cultures, and through ways you work to help people see that they're inspirational themselves.
I love that. And as a leader, it's crucial, right? To ask those questions to discover and unlock their talents and their inspirations. So it's the power of asking and probing questions, right, to them. So let's bring this idea to life. Matthew, can you share a moment from your leadership journey where one story, one speech, or one action from you shifted the mindset or energy of an entire team or an organization?
Yes, I think the biggest thing, and I'll probably say simply with hopefully we're going to have the same impact working with you guys we are in the current FORA we've just delivered. But before, back in the day, maybe, I don't know, 6 years ago when FORA first started, we held, when we were a small company, held something called FORA Fest. We took the organization away, the entire organization, front of house building staff, backstage staff, our HQ staff, and took them away for 2 days. And one day was always about setting the vision, inspiring them about where we saw ourselves as a company, what we wanted from our teams, what we were going to give back to our teams. And that day was always an inspirational day about buying everyone into the vision and getting everyone excited about what we were going to achieve. And then the second day was about bringing that to life, right? Working on challenges and discovering each other whilst also having fun, a big social element around. So there was lots of challenges and activities and games, but also socializing. And what it did is it helped basically kind of to bring together the kind of key elements we've done there through active learning and listening and training, but in a social fun setting. And so whilst people were having fun and enjoying themselves, they were also understanding about how we were going to bring this to life. And I think it's really important that sometimes we as leaders, we can set out this great vision and it could be very simple, but to every single employee, we have now 650 employees. However, if we set a very single mission and didn't give them any context or reframing, each one of them could basically interpret it very differently. And you've got 100 people going from different directions. And so being able to actually articulate that and also understand how their impact is going to help it's really important. And so for me, when we used to do these, we used to come back literally, it normally was a Thursday, Friday, have everyone had the weekend off, and Monday you would come back. And I would always say this to people as an example, that I felt like I saw like a shift in people's perception and energy and creativity and passion for the organization, and like smiles on people's faces and engagement. And on that Monday and Tuesday and that whole first week, you would just see this kind of shift of people just kind of like loving what they do. And that is a successful company, right? You get that culture right, spot on, and you can make sure your entire workforce feels like they're part of that company, and ready to do their best work for you and stand up for you. I mean, there's no money in the world that can kind of create that. And so for me, that's definitely probably one of those kind of inspirational moments of how we should behave as organizations.
I love that. That's a fantastic example. Thanks for sharing. It feels like I want to come there now. So I can feel the passion. Let's switch things around a bit. Have you ever tried to inspire people and completely missed the mark? What did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so we've just recently been through a joint merger with the FORA and TOG, the office group. And I say recently, it was 2.5 years ago now, but it feels very recent still. And there was a lot of learnings, as you can manage, bring two organizations together that looked the same, did the same product, from the front of the house, two houses looked the same, sold office space, sold desks, sold the experience, sold a workplace that was going to support businesses. And then open the doors and you go in and the houses are very different. They're very different layout, size, shapes, how they work culturally. And there was a perception, I think, when we brought those organizations together that you could just continue being as FORA's culture, TOG's culture, and kind of a clash of everything. And I think leaders came in the perception, continuing leading how they used to lead in their organization. And actually over time, on the opposite side of, your parent of your department, it was run very differently. And so the perception of not being able to understand that very quickly became actually causing a few tensions. It caused a lot of tension. And I think that very quickly we understood that you couldn't continue just being what you were doing before. You need to understand what was happening on the other side. So I needed to understand what was happening in the office group and TOG and how they were being managed and what the culture was like and what was important to them, and vice versa. The TOG leadership team needs to do that for FORA. And probably that was the biggest learning, where we assumed we could continue on and we should be acting the same. In actual fact, we didn't actually probe enough and ask enough questions and understand what was important to them and how they like to be managed and what was working and what didn't work and what they'd tried in the past. And I think that was probably a big learning for us, if I ever did a merger again, to really understand what we were walking into, because you may be the same businesses from the customer's perspective, but potentially behind the door, when you open the door, you've got two very different cultures, methodologies, ways of working that actually you need to be more aware of going into it, I think. And we were so focused on probably just simple processes and ways of working that we forgot about the culture and how the people worked and who the people worked for and what inspired them.
I love that. It's back to that curiosity, right? Like understanding their context and their reality before jumping to conclusions eventually, right? Like having that humbleness approach towards understanding where they come from and probe, like you said, about their context, what have successfully worked for you, where did you fail and why, so you can learn from each other and eventually lift the whole group together, right? And make them rise. So I love that. Thanks for sharing. Precious moment of vulnerability here. So thank you for that. And I think that's so important for listeners to hear that even as a seasoned leader, sometimes you can misread a room or misread a moment, right? And let me ask you this. A lot of leaders believe that inspiration is only relevant during good times. But the real test is during crisis, disruption, eventually pandemic, right? How have you used inspiration strategically when times were tough and not great?
What comes to mind is probably during COVID. I think COVID was obviously a very difficult time for most people. How do you keep a team inspired that are stuck at home, that can't do their job, potentially scared of redundancies and being laid off and not being able to even get a job, and where's the bill compared? And then there was probably a lot of uncertainty through a lot of people during that time, that maybe organizations probably weren't supportive of their people and didn't understand. And I think we were very lucky at the time. We had a very supportive investor who said, hey, look, we're going to keep everyone on. We are going to pay everyone the additional to the furlough that we had in this country, and that actually we're going to pay everyone 100% salaries, and we're going to make sure we look after people. And that was really inspiring for us as leaders, that we had that support of our investor, and it enabled us to then obviously have great conversations and use inspiration strategically to say, look, our investors believe in this and they believe in you. And that in itself is just, sometimes listening to your boss's boss can be more inspirational and thankful if they think you're doing a good job than your boss, because obviously you and your boss, your line manager, will speak every day. And sometimes me saying well done doesn't always have the gravitas then, because I say it maybe often or infrequently, and you work together so far. So saying it someone else or a different leader from different departments actually hugely impactful. And I think sometimes we forget that as leaders, how inspiring someone else saying thanks from a different department or 2 lines up, 2 lines down can have on somebody and their work. And so I think keeping our teams engaged, I think through inspiration always comes around communication. I think where we fail as organizations continually and where we can succeed is all around communication. So how you communicate on growth strategy, how you communicate on being a great leader, how you communicate inspiring people. And I think big part of that was really around how we continue to have fun with our teams. We were meant to be having our FORA Fest during COVID. We ended up having an online 5-hour session. We had drag queen bingo, we had a pizza making, we did mixology, and those things, they're fun, but they're also really important for the teams. And I think inspiration also comes from, you've got to have some fundamentals before you can inspire. Your team have to trust you and have a relationship that they know you trust them and they trust you and you've got their back. Because I only think once you've got that, can you really truly inspire people. Me being, setting the vision and setting the stand and showing how we're going to go there. But if my team's like, well, he's a bit in and out and he's not consistent and he doesn't deliver his goals and he doesn't live by his values, I can be as inspirational as I want from an outset. But actually, if I don't have that trust and respect, and I think that allowed us to be, because we were a small company at the time, everybody knew each other, everybody had a lot of respect for each other, everyone knew what the vision of the company was, and then being able to have that continuation was really important in that time. And it could have gone the other way, right? We could have ended up saying, hey, we don't have investment and we need to let people go and we've got to keep the business going. And I think that would have really bad for companies who've had to do that. They've had no choice to make sure they can continue into the future. And that's been really hard for them to then bounce back to, be a great organization again.
I love that. And especially the part of not just saying that you got their back, but they really feel it, right? Like it's just not words, but it's a true sentiment that they have, right? So I love that. Beautiful example. Thanks for sharing. And let's get a bit practical here. If I'm a leader listening right now, what are the 3 things leader can start doing today to inspire others in a way that's basically authentic to them?
I think the number one is listen, and truly listen. And something actually working with you guys made me, in our leadership program, actually made me go back and change the way I did. Because again, as leaders, you're busy doing day to day. And I actually realized I wasn't listening a lot to the teams when they were coming to me. And actually, I wasn't actually about to support them because I wasn't really truly listening to what they were asking me. So I think listening is a huge skill, is underrated, underutilized, and actually a very simple tool that can actually completely transform a way that you build trust. And trust, and ultimately, is how you become a great leader, how you inspire people. Without trust, there is nothing. And so I think the biggest way of building trust is actually if you listen, give people the time, the space. Don't jump in, truly listen, ask more questions. You get really to the actual what they're asking. Sometimes they may be asking you for something. Actually, they're trying to ask you something different, but you don't allow them the time and the energy and the space to allow them to get there. And I think that's a huge, big, I say not really a trick as such, but a skill that maybe we take for granted, that we listen. And I think that's totally, so that's really opened my eyes, and I've actually seen my team already slightly change and how they're acting with me. Now I'm giving them space and time, and we set a kind of a listening half hour. I put a listening 30 minutes in where I'm like, I'm just not going to say anything. I may say why, tell me more, how is this, and coach them, but never given any answers. Don't come to the conclusion. And that's been a big thing for me, actually. And that's really, I've seen a big transformation in them supporting themselves more and actually seeing them grow. And inevitably, my job as a leader and to inspire them ultimately is to bait them into the new leaders. And I'm going to be doing that by listening more and giving them encouragement. Coaching, I think, is a big thing, and then kind of I've incorporated both into one in terms of tell me more and what would you do differently next time and why is that important to you, or why do you think that of yourself, and actually trying to discover and let them dig a bit deeper, because I think a lot of us, we filter on the surface and very rarely go deeper, and we get through life on that level. And actually, if we could go down deeper, we'd probably build so much more trust and respect and resilience through each other. Then I think that would be an important thing. And the third is about being supportive. I think being genuine, supporting them, making sure kind of when you burn that trust is saying that I'm here for anything you need, for the bad times and the good times. And I think it's really helpful that they know that I've got their back and they've got my back, right? This is a two-way street. It doesn't mean you're a leader, you don't get anything from your team. And I think maybe sometimes as leaders, we have a perception of restraining ourselves from our junior teams because we shouldn't be associated with them. And actually, I think what that does sometimes, and can actually work in the opposite way, because actually my job, like I said, is here to create the next leaders of the future. And I need to do that by working closely with them and actually not showing them that I get stuff wrong all the time and that I have insecurities. And sometimes I get scared when I have to present. Like it's natural. Those things don't go away. Just because you're a senior leader and you think you're experienced, you consistently have those same issues with you or those same little fears. And I think it's really important to share and be honest and show those commitments and vulnerability, like you mentioned earlier, that it's really important. I think as we get older, people are scared to show vulnerability. I think that's the biggest difference. I've never been shown. I've said, like, I don't understand. I need support. I want this. How about this? And I've always been my genuine self, and I've never changed. I don't have a work persona and an outside persona. But I see many people do, because they think that's how they should act within work.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. So as a resume, so I hear listening, I had a smile on my face, because I will never forget a moment where we had the drawing exercise and the clown that went completely off page, right? Brilliant piece of art, memories for life there. So listening and the power of listening, right? And allow pauses and silences and absolutely not jumping to conclusions. We have the idea of coaching, right? Like many people associate coaching with sports coaching, but what's really coaching within a corporate environment? It's about, like to your point, right? Making sure that they come up with the answers and letting the space for them to allow their growth to happen by you facilitating their answers, basically, right? Making sure that you ask the right questions so they're buying to their own conclusions. So I love that one. And last but not least, I love what you're saying about being supportive, right? So you can be a brilliant coach and you can be the best listener, but if there is no clear actions that follows all those great discussions, nothing will really happen, right? So I love that. Thanks, Matthew. Super powerful. And when you would see someone on your team who is really brilliant, but doesn't see themselves as really inspiring, how would you help them step into that role without forcing them to sort of perform in a way?
I think it comes to something that I said before. I think bringing those two organizations together and misaligning or misunderstanding the culture of each organization was probably really important. And I think there's an example I can probably use from there, is that their new direct reports, which came from the office group, the way they were being managed was very different than how I managed and led my team. And I just continued to be my authentic self and how I managed. And I'm very democratic. I'm quite allow people to make mistakes and learn from themselves. And that's my approach. And I kind of lead from the back and kind of encourage and guide and shout suggestions and kind of let them kind of go themselves, rather than kind of leading from the front and showing by example. And that's my management style, or leadership style, I should say. And I continue to be that person. And actually what happened is that person didn't like that way of leadership, didn't understand it, didn't say, okay, well, here's an issue, I want you to go and deal with it. What you come back and tell me what you want to do. Actually, they needed a lot of direction, clear vision, milestones. This is why we're doing it. This is what good looks like as well. And that was the use to it. And I think for me, being very clear about how that person needs to be managed, what that person needs from me as a leader, and actually what that person actually needs from each other around their team and how they work. Because I think part of that was then that person didn't really feel that they were able to do a great job because they were really unsure of my messaging. So they didn't know then how to go and inspire people to lead the concept that I may have come up with. And so that became very unclear. And actually what we spent a lot of time obviously working through that, and actually allowed them to be, gave them confidence that they were able to do more on their own than presuming they should just be, this is what I want, this is how I'm going to do it, here are the milestones, you go off and do it. They're never going to be inspirational. They're going to come up, be creative and come up with the new ideas and able to kind of inspire new generations or their team. So it took some while for us to kind of coach to break those areas down and kind of piece by piece allow them to think about new ideas, how they would do this, how they would inspire it, how they would think about it slightly differently, and how they would understand how it would come across each of their teams and how they would get the best out of their teams. Because inspiration, of course, has many hats, and you need to understand what the end user is going to understand, what inspires them, right? It could be, I need a very clear pathway. I actually just need an idea. I'm going to run away with it. I'm going to come back and present to you. So inspiration comes in many forms. And I think understanding the final user and how they're going to work and how you're going to inspire that person is really important. And again, that was my kind of learning to myself that my way isn't always the right way, even though it's so natural to me. And sometimes going in a new organization, sometimes you need to break those things down, understand, well, what is inspiration to you? And I think that was probably one of the biggest kind of learnings to then allow them to actually inspire. Now they have, they definitely work a version of both of me and the previous leader, but I now feel more confident in actually taking challenging situations and being able to inspire new team members and actually thinking I can do this myself rather than thinking, hold on, I need someone else to come and tell me exactly what I need to do.
Love that. Matthew, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Before we wrap up, let me ask you this. If you could pass on one truth about inspiring leadership to the next generation of leaders, as you mentioned a few times, what would it be and why?
I think listen. I think really do listen. It's one of those skills that I've said that we take for granted. We presume we listen. And I think as it's one of those simple skills. I think communication around how we deliver and how you listen is probably one of the big things I've challenged with. So one thing I've personally, being vulnerable now is I've always presumed I have never been creative and I speak too fast and I'm not articulate enough. And I've worked over there for quite some number of years to actually understand why. And actually what happened is it was a conception of myself that these things have happened. But there was also some skills that I learned around taking time to pause, to listen, to think about what I was saying before speaking, actually, and then taking also the time to actually truly listen to teams before responding. And for me, that was the biggest takeaway around actually how I become a more inspirational leader, taking the time to listen, stop in the right environment, in the right time, in the right moment. It's really important that you give them, looking people in the eyes, gesturing that you understood, understanding and repeating back. And it's those basic things. We are time constrained as human beings these days. So those basic things that were innate to be great leaders, I think we've forgotten over time. And so I would always just say, take time, think about communication as a skill that is important both for articulating what you're trying to explain and your vision and values, but also taking time to listen and making sure people understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I love that. And yet so simple, yet that complicated, right? So in a world where communication is everywhere, you have WhatsApps, emails, Slacks, all the social media, you're scrolling, you go from A to B in no time. So listening would be a true source of inspiration for me as well. So I'm glad you're saying that. It's a superpower. So appreciate that. And to everyone listening, here's your challenge. Think of one person on your team who could go further than their belief. What will you say or do this week to help them see what's really possible and unlock their full potential? So thanks for turning into the Relevance Hour podcast. And if you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe, share it with someone who needs a spark or just an inspiration, and join us next time as we continue exploring how relevance and leadership are future. So Matthew, thank you so much for this incredible and inspiring session. And we look forward to having you on our next session, hopefully very soon. So thank you, Matthew.
All right. Thanks all.
This was the Relevance Hour. Don't forget to follow, rate, and share. And keep leading with relevance. See you next time.